Today I interviewed Kurankye Sekyi-Otu, who's both a friend and the Chief Strategy Officer at a financial services organization. As long as I've known Kurankye, he's always had a very high level of confidence. He exudes confidence, and he calls it walking strong, which is essentially embracing who you are and behaving as though you belong in any room that you find yourself in. So I think you'll enjoy this interview, and there's a lot to take away from some of the lessons and tips that he shares with us. So check it out. So welcome, Kurankye, and I'm just going to share a little bit about what it is that you do. So Kurankye is the Chief Strategy Officer and sits on the executive leadership team of an asset management firm. He's responsible for the global distribution strategy, marketing, and the implementation of the business's strategic initiatives. So Kurankye has had a very long career in Canadian capital markets, which we're going to hear a little bit more about through this discussion. He lives in Toronto with his wife and daughter, and he's very engaged in community development initiatives, which, as he just mentioned, that's where we met, an organization called the Canadian Association of Urban Financial Professionals. It's rebranded a couple of times, but that's the current name. So it's interesting where the focus of this conversation is coming from and why I was so excited to have him as a guest. And it goes back to probably about 15 years ago when Kurankye was president of the organization. And each year the president picks a theme for the year. And Kurankye's theme was Walk Strong. And what that really translates to, we're going to talk a little bit more about it, but it's really about having confidence, owning your own skin, holding your head up high, and just feeling confident in whatever room you're sitting in. And it's so interesting because, again, it was just the theme for that particular year, but that's played out for me so many times since then when, you know, there are times when I felt the imposter syndrome and felt a bit intimidated by the folks I was around. And, you know, being able to have that little mantra in the back of my head saying, listen, just own it and just step up and act as though you belong in the room. And it's so important because we know in sports, they say so much of life, so much of sports is really that mental game. So once you get your mental game right, it's much easier for us to execute. So I want to thank you for introducing that whole concept of Walk Strong into my life. And I thought it would be interesting if you wanted to just kind of start by just sharing, because you have a very interesting and courageous career path, just talking about some of the things that you've done in financial markets in your career.
Thanks, Dion, and a pleasure to be here. And first of all, congratulations to you. This is an awesome forum. You may not know this, but you're a mentor to me, and I followed your journey and all the risks that you've taken in entrepreneurial endeavors, and it's a pleasure to be here. So thanks for having me. My journey, it's over 25 years. I started in the business, asset management or finance in 1994. Didn't have a ton of, my family just comes from more of an academic background. My father's a retired professor. So my mother worked for the Ministry of the Attorney General for Ontario. So didn't have a lot of finance or business contacts. So I had to sort of forge them on my own and plot my way through the business through, fairly junior opportunities at asset management companies, so mutual fund companies, and then networking my way into roles that I more highly coveted with help. I had folks that reached out to me, put their hand out, and gave me an opportunity to interview at some of the more interesting organizations, like some of the Canadian banks and some of the larger fund companies. So through my journey, I think I started to appreciate fairly early on, that I liked organizations that were smaller. I preferred organizations where a little less politics. You had a bit more of an impact on the organization. How you were measured was a little less subjective, more objective, because I came up through business development and sales and marketing. To the extent that you bring in business, it's fairly black and white. Who brought the business in? Kurankye brought the business in. So you get paid or measured accordingly. So while I found some of the larger organizations really interesting because you gain a fairly broad cross section of different business units and where they intersect with different clients and different parts of the business. I found I did struggle a little bit, and to a certain extent in some of those larger organizations. So I sought out smaller. When I left one of the banks, I joined a smaller organization that ultimately got merged into a larger one. So that was a short-lived experience. And then in 2003, I was determined to find that sort of boutique orientation. So ended up co-founding a small fund management company with some others. Was 5 years. And 2008 was a difficult period. So the end of it didn't work. But we wound the organization was wound up a few years later. But it was an awesome experience because it's a small firm, you did everything from business development, structuring funds and prospectuses, engaging with investment banking and lawyers and back office solutions. And so just the breadth with which you had to engage because it was a small organization. When I moved on from that organization in 2009, I just felt very confident and armed. Notwithstanding the fact that it didn't work, actually, contrary to the fact that it didn't work, I actually felt more empowered to seek out a boutique organization going forward. And that's where I ended up at the firm I am today.
So I have a question for you because, and also I'm familiar with your career path as well. So it sounds like, I know this for a fact, that we talk about, learning from failure. Failure is kind of like a stepping stone, but for many of us, failure can be very crushing, right? And also, but I do find that you have a built-in resilience, and maybe it has something to do with that whole inner confidence that you have about yourself. But you talked about the fact that, you had a firm, things didn't quite work out, but you were still ready to jump into the next. So what are kind of some of the ways that you're able to kind of shake off some of that stuff? Just chalk it up to a learning experience and then jump into the next experience.
It's a great question. And I'd imagine at the time, I didn't really think about it in those terms. I think it's more upon reflection that I've gone back and said, wow, why did I make the decision, or what gave me the confidence to make the decision? As I reflect back, I think I've always been a ferocious student of this business. I study it, not just, I think sometimes folks, they get into a certain segment of the industry, but then they have blind spots to the other areas. I've always studied and had an appreciation for various parts of the industry. So whether I worked in the mutual fund space, I paid a lot of attention to the private market space or the alternative asset space, the capital market space, the interconnection between capital markets and asset management. So I've always had sort of a lens, at least tried to have a broad lens across the industry. So when I decided to make changes or pivot from one area to another, it was well informed. And so I established a thesis. So I've always had this view and a thesis for the business, and I kind of retest it. So the confidence came from having a strong and informed thesis for where the industry was going. Not from where the industry is or where it's been, in terms of where it's going. And that's what sort of kind of allowed me to make those changes. I absolutely consult with people who I respect in the business, and I continue to do that. I continue to always have coffees and lunches with folks who are in different parts of the industry to make sure that I continue to be well informed.
But I think one of the key things that you just said is the fact that you see yourself. I'm paraphrasing what you said. You see yourself as a student of the business. So it's not like, okay, I've been here and I've done X number of years, I'm an expert in this. Because as you know, markets, things change all the time, right? So I think if you think of yourself as a student and you see yourself as always learning, then naturally you're going to make mistakes. So those are just like learning experiences. So I think that that's probably a critical factor in terms of being able to allow ourselves to be like, okay, now we learned something, and now let's take that learning and let's move on to the next experience, sort of thing. So so I think it's very strong. And in terms of, because you did say earlier that you mentor a lot of younger folks in the industry as well. So what advice do you give to them in terms of their ability to demonstrate confidence and to feel worthy in terms of whatever room that they're in terms of walking strong? Like what sorts of, is there any advice that you give them typically?
Walk strong, and as I reflect back and walk strong, and had the audacity to come up with that phrase so many years ago. But I think what you come to realize, and actually, you know what, a great analogy is golf. So I'm not a great golfer, right? And I was terrified of golf. I got into golf late in life. I'm still not a great golfer. I don't golf a lot. But what relaxed me when I started to realize that most people aren't great golfers either, right? So, most folks are still learning. They're still taking lessons. I know I have a friend that he's been golfing for his entire life. He takes lessons to this day. He's still improving. He's still refining his craft. And I find that in business, when you get into a room with other folks, they're still learning. They don't know everything. They also consult other folks. They have mentors. They have coaches. They ask questions. So once you start to overcome this fear that you're not the smartest person in the room, first of all, you actually may be. And even if you're not, it's actually not such a bad thing either. You're learning from others. So Walk Strong became, for me, a reflection of the fact that I belong in the room just as much as everybody else does. And their journeys, the way they got into that room may be different from mine, but their journey was one where they had to learn or had someone reach out to them to help. And often they don't have all the answers either. And so that once I kind of freed myself from that sort of that maybe the word is anxiety, maybe it's a strong word. I sort of and understand every situation. Did I freeze?
You froze for a second. We can always
okay.
So you could go.
Okay.
Okay. So cool. So, but what I guess I heard the two things. So like we mentioned before, you talked about the seeing yourself as a learner, a lifelong learner, but also you talked about also reaching out and you said that you seek advice from different people. So in what you were just saying, that's also where you hear those things, because when you start seeking advice from other people one-on-one, they tell you their story about when they felt insecure, when they whatever. And it's like, okay, that also reinforces, yeah, we're all in this together. We're all learning. People may not be where you are right now, but they were there one time. And anyways, so yes, so it's about having the courage to, be that learner and reach out to people and learn from other people. So that's cool. And then I know that what you do is also, because you're very involved in the community, in terms of also trying to find opportunities for others. So I know that, that you started a scholarship in terms of helping young girls to be able to attend school, get a better education, in terms of, again, back to that, providing access to folks and making them also have those opportunities. And I know with the Black Opportunity Fund as well, it's similarly focused in terms of making sure that some folks who don't normally get access to capital and so forth have that opportunity as well. So that seems to be kind of like a focus that you have right now in terms of now making sure that you are paying it forward and making sure that other people have that access as well.
Yeah, absolutely. There's a phrase that's particularly in this current climate that's been used for frequently, is that we're not necessarily seeking equality of outcomes, we're seeking equality of opportunities. And in many situations, particularly in our community, there's a disadvantage in terms of the opportunity. And if we can start, absolutely, there's a number of organizations that are there to solve for that. And I'm also one that you have to sort of speak. One thing to walk the walk, you got to walk the talk, right? So you actually have to do, and you yourself act in a way that supports your community. So my wife and I, so I'll back up in a moment. Yeah, community, urban financial professionals. My mentor, disadvantaged communities, particularly Black and Brown communities. I'm a founding supporter of the Black Opportunity Fund, which really seeks to sort of address deficiencies in capital and the Black community across Canada as it relates to education, entrepreneurship, social justice, healthcare, and I'm very proud to be a part of their organization. And then my daughter's school is a private school, and there's a lack of diversity in her school, and they're looking to address how to increase the diverse population of the school. So I said, well, I'm going to step up myself in fellowship, and that takes care of one girl that identifies as Black from grade 9 to 12 at the school, and the scholarship is called the Sekyi-Otu in Narona Walk Strong Scholarship. So there we are. The Walk Strong has come full circle. Mm-hmm. From many years ago, and the idea there was that, why do we call it Walk Strong? Because the only difference between this girl that will start in the 2022-23 school year, between her and all the other girls, is that she didn't have the financial means to attend the school. She has to meet the academic curriculum requirements, the criteria for not the financial means to attend. Beyond that, she belongs. And in fact, there'll be a day where she appreciates what's been done for her, and she'll pay it forward also. So that was sort of the genesis of the scholarship. And we're very proud, my wife and I, to be able to establish that.
Yeah, that is really great, because, and I love the whole concept that you were sharing about the equality of opportunity and making sure we're trying to make the playing field a lot more level, and then people are free to now, have those opportunities that would not be available to them otherwise. So, well, thank you. Just in a closing context, I just wanted to ask about, because I know that you do have a young daughter, and from us speaking, I know that the whole Walk Strong is not something that just popped up. It's actually kind of like how you lived your life. Like you, from the time you were young, you just always were raised to feel that you belonged in any room that you were in, whether it was a classroom, a boardroom, or what have you. So just wondering, like, as a parent, what sorts of messages do you share with your daughter? And could some of the listeners share with their children in terms of kind of reinforcing that confidence of having confidence in ourselves?
That's a great question. I've also reflected on that. As you can imagine, I turned 50 this year, so there's a lot of reflection in terms of my life and family and different relationships over the years. And you're right. What I passed on to my daughter is really a function of what was passed on to me from my parents. Right. So parents immigrated to Canada, originally from Ghana, to the U.S. and then made their way to Toronto in the late 60s, very early 70s. I was born in Toronto, and listen, there was never the notion of not doing your best. There's never the notion of you couldn't be anything you wanted to be. It was always you work hard, get good grades, and the rest will take care of itself. So it was always, no matter the environment I was in, whether it was in school or early in schools, elementary school, high school, university, and my career journey, there was never this idea where I couldn't be the best. And that was sort of instilled in our DNA and from myself and my siblings. So my daughter, she's sort of inherited that gene. I think she's almost too confident, but I take confidence over the opposite. I think we're trying to instill in her this idea that she can do whatever she wants to do. There's no limits. Whether it's something in the academic space, something in the art space, something in the sports arena, that she has an ability to succeed, and the only barriers are the ones that she puts in front of herself. So we're very proud of what she's begun. She's only 9 years old, but she's become a young woman, but she's coming to her own and establishing herself in the space.
Nice. And I'm sure she also is learning from the commitment that you both have to the community as well. So also like building up our own confidence and also making opportunities for others. So I think that there's so much there to learn. So thank you so much for taking the time to join me this morning. I think that this conversation is going to be really helpful to a lot of people, because it's very common for people to have the imposter syndrome and things like that. And really to be able to talk about that whole concept of really, walking strong and feeling yourself and having confidence in any room that you're in, I think is so critical. So thank you very much. And I look forward to continuing to be friends and staying in touch.
Yeah, this is a lot of fun. One final thing I should mention as well before we sign off, in the spirit of Walk Strong, because my daughter has witnessed this in her own home. My wife started her own business, a natural skincare line, which actually combines elements of both their heritages, so Indian and West African culture, So my daughter actually gets to see that come to life. This is really exciting. So thank you for having me, and I look forward to seeing your journey prosper going forward from here. Have a great holiday.
Thank you so much.
If you enjoyed that interview, please subscribe to my YouTube channel, My Lemonade Stand. You can also stream it off of your favorite podcast streaming platform. Looking forward to seeing you next time.